Hello everyone, I hope you're having an excellent Sunday because we have a very nice game between Levon, Aronian and Fabiano Caruana from the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz event. It's a 5-day event that has a prize fund of some $150,000 where first prize is $37,000 and I believe $500. Yesterday was the first day of the rapid section, so there will be a single round robin with the 3 days of rapid, and then after that a double round robin with 18 rounds of blitz, which will be of course very enjoyable and crazy. Round 1 was very eventful, and not round 1, day 1 was very eventful and produced some wonderful games. But before we check that out, we do have a nice photo challenge. It's also a part of the of this St. Louis event. So who are the two gentlemen in the photo? I will give you a little hint. They are the official commentators for the Russian stream, and also the Grandmaster on the right is a substitute for Alexander Grishuk if he will not be able to play this tournament. So that being said, let's check it out. Aronian has the white pieces and he opens this game with e4. So like I said, it's a rapid event, 25 minutes per player and 10-second delay starting with move 1. We have c6, Fabiano goes for the Caro-Kann defense, d4 and d5. So it's hard to say, is he now preparing the Caro-Kann defense or is he just not playing the Petrov, so Carlsen doesn't see what crazy lines he has in store for him for November. E captures on d5, c captures on d5 and bishop to d3. So the exchange variation. Knight to c6, c3, defending the d4 pawn. We have a knight to f6, bishop to f4, and now bishop to g4 by Caruana. Queen to b3, now attacking the b7 pawn. We have queen to d7, defending the pawn, and now comes knight to d2. e6, we have knight g to f3, bishop to d6, offering to trade bishops. Bishop captures, queen captures, and here of course, white could go for this juicy b7 pawn, or he could simply castle. If it was a classical game, probably Aronian would castle here, but Aronian is not one to back down from a fight. So he plays queen captures on b7 and says that this is perfectly fine. We have rook to b8, attacking the queen, queen to a6, and now not capturing the rook here. Not capturing the pawn immediately, because this would, bring a lot of problems for white. I'm sure all of you can see it. Bishop to b5, there is no way to prevent the attack on this knight. So here you would have to give up the exchange. After rook captures, queen captures, you would simply be down the exchange. So after rook to b8, queen to a6, we have castles by Caruana. Bishop to b5, a move that was not all that necessary here. Probably he thought maybe Caruana will play something like rook to c8, but in fact he simply plays rook to b6, kicks away the queen and defends the knight on c6. So perhaps a slight loss of a tempo for Aronian. Queen to a4 and now simply knight to e7, getting the knight out of the way. Knight to e5, attacking the bishop on g4, and here knight to g6. We have knight captures, and here, well, it's not a critical moment in the game, but it could have been a critical moment in the game, because here h3 was played. g3 seems to be a better move, because after h3, Caruana played knight back to f6. But he also could have played this wonderful sacrifice, knight captures on f2. It's not all that, scientific as it does, you have to really feel creative and want to be willing to create something, to go for something like this. If you, as it's not impossible to calculate everything here. After king captures, rook f to b8. This is the idea, threatening a6 to grab the b2 pawn. And after white plays something like bishop to d3, as a6 will be played, rook captures on b2 is coming, and now bishop to c2. The queen will now be guarding the bishop. Here we have queen to f4 check, attacking the king and the knight here on d2. We have knight to f3 blocking, and now queen to e4 with a double attack on the bishop here. And now it's a question of whether white would defend properly or not. Any defense of the bishop with the rook isn't all that great. Knight to e1 is the best move, but who could possibly find all these nice moves? But okay, after h3, Caruana did not go for this wonderful sacrifice. He played knight to f6. We have knight to b3, and now comes e5. e5, a very nice move, because now if you capture here and captures, white is going to lose castling privileges. He will have to play something like king to f1, and then black will be on the attack. Here after e5, Aronian finally castles, but this allows Caruana to create this, well, not a passed pawn, but a very fast pawn. So rook f to e1. We have knight to h5, now threatening to bring the knight over to f4. Bishop to f1, bringing the bishop back to the defense. Knight to h4 now, and here comes queen to a5. Queen to a5 is the move that loses the game for Aronian, but it's not all that easy to see why. Here, one of the ideas that was not played the game, here Caruana played queen to g6, which is a very nice move, but he also could have played a queen to f4. After queen to f4, then there's really not all that much to do here. Whatever you do, for example, if you play something like knight to d2, getting the knight out of the b file, the queen will simply capture it. And if you play any move, for example, something like bishop to e2, this of course does not work, because now the rook is coming to g6, and there will be no defense. Whatever white plays, black will simply sacrifice half of the pieces, and that will be it. But Caruana had a similar idea. Instead of after queen to a5, instead of queen to f4, he played queen to g6, which is a bit slower, as now the rook cannot come immediately to g6. But it works quite well, because Aronian played queen to a5 instead of queen captures on a7. But again, it's very hard to understand why this doesn't work. For example, queen captures on a7 instead of queen to a5 there would have been better, because now rook to e3 will not be a good enough defense. Now you can play knight to f3 check. Of course, you cannot capture. And after king to h1, now you play queen to g5, which is the idea. Basically making the room for the rook here. And now rook captures on f3, black can simply capture on f3. For example, c4, whatever white plays, captures, and now knight to f4, rook blocks, and rook comes to g6. This is the whole point of this variation. So this is what I wanted to say here, that after knight to h4, instead of this queen to a5 move, queen to captures on a7 would have been better for Aronian, because now rook to e3, after this queen to g6, now rook to e3 would have been playable. Because now this knight to f3 check runs into king to h1, as we've seen in the previous variation, but now queen to g5 runs into rook captures on f3. And now you no longer have the option of capturing, because the rook on b6 is undefended. So here you would have to play an in-between move, rook captures, and after a captures, e captures on f3. And here queen to b7, all would be well for white. So, getting back to our position, after knight to h4, so queen to f4, after this queen to a5 move, queen to f4 would have been the best idea, because it immediately allows rook to g6. Like we've said, Caruana went for queen to g6, and now we have queen captures on d5. Like we've said, rook to e3 does not work in this position, because the rook on b6 is defended. And now Caruana goes for knight to f3. This comes with check. Of course, you cannot capture the knight. King to h1, and here, what do you play in this position? Immediately when I saw this position, I thought, oh yes, here comes the American beauty, queen g3. But of course, I thought, yes, now f captures, knight captures, and it's checkmate. What a wonderful checkmate. But unfortunately for Caruana, the queen doesn't have to be captured. First, white can play g captures on f3, and then after a forced variation, that is queen captures with check, bishop to g2 blocking, now queen captures bishop. King captures, knight f4 check, forking the king and queen. King moves, knight captures, but now after rook captures on e4, white would simply be up 2 pawns. So this does not work. So here there is a much better move Caruana played, so feel free to pause the video here and try to find the best move for black here, the move Caruana played. So I will give it a couple of seconds if you want decide whether to do it or not. It's a nice Sunday puzzle. Of course, you can always capture the rook, but that's not the best move. If that was the best move, I would not, create a puzzle out of it. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations for not going for the American Beauty, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, knight the g3 check. Now there are no options, white has to capture the knight. We have pawn captures and queen captures, and this is move 25. There is no defense against queen to h2 checkmate. An interesting line is of course g captures on f3, but then rook to g6 wins. The threat is queen to g1 checkmate. If you move the bishop, then of course queen captures bishop is checkmate, and if you move the bishop anywhere else so the rook can guard the g file, then of course you can either checkmate on g2, or even queen captures on h3 also will be checkmate. So you can simply resign here, but it's it's never wise to resign on move 25, because then everywhere on the internet it will say you lost in 25 moves. So first Aronian decided to give up the queen. Queen e5, we have knight captures on e5, pawn captures on e5, and now queen captures on e5. So giving up the queen for a piece. We have rook to d1 and now f5. So this is now completely lost position for white, but they decided to play it out. Rook to d6, offering a trade of rooks. Rook captures on a7, queen to g3. We have rook to b1 and now f4, simply pushing those pawns. Knight to c5, we have queen to e3, b4 now, f3, we have rook to e7, f captures on g2, bishop captures on g2, and here after rook to h6, finally Levon Aronian resigned the game, as there's really nothing to do here. You're getting checkmated, rook captures, queen captures, the rook is controlling the f file. Now it is indeed all over. But now it's move 35, and it's always better to resign on move 35 than on move 25. And it's a rapid game, there's always a chance your opponent will mess up. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I did prepare the standings after day one, so here they are. Fabiano Caruana with a perfect score. He won all three of his games, and during the rapid section you will get 2 points for a victory, unlike in the Blitz section where you will get only 1 point for a victory. So here, as you can see, 6 points, but that's for 3 games. He won all of them. Maxim Vashir in second with 4, tied with Sergei Karakin with 4, then Mamedyarov, Anand, and Nakamura with 3. Levon Aronian, Linier Dominguez, and Alexander Grishuk with 2, and Wesley So in last place with 1 point. So it's interesting, Wesley always has crazy days in this Grand Chess Tour. This is the third part of the Grand Chess Tour, so perhaps he will have better luck in day 2 and 3, and also perhaps in the Blitz section. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jamie Comas, Daniel Drelic, and Sean Wilcoxon for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, perhaps with another interesting game from the St. Louis Rapid event, or if I make up my mind, I will see if I will remake the Game 3 of the Fischer vs. Taimanov series. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.